Hello everyone, welcome to my review for Lords of the Fallen. Right off the bat I'll say this game is gonna be a hit or miss depending on your preference in this type of games. There are things in this game that some can give it a pass, but some can get annoyed enough to even hate this game. So my experience with this game can be vastly different to yours, especially in this game. So in short I can say this game took its lessons for difficulty from Dark Souls 2. That's how I can summarize the game. So now let's get into the details. So first of all, performance is not good as usual, similar to many games released this year, especially the UE5 games. The game visuals are beautiful, but with this bad optimization it doesn't matter how good it looks, because nobody can enjoy it without some amount of compromise. Again, even though they did F up, the one positive thing I'm seeing from this is they're actively trying to fix the game. The rate at which these patches are coming out is good to see. And I have experienced the performance getting better with each patch as I have played through the game. They're also listening to some community feedbacks, adding more quality of life changes. And in case you're wondering, they're not making the game more easier or anything. The changes were mostly quality of life changes. They're not nerfing or making anything easy. In fact, they actually buffed and fixed some exploits of some bosses and some stronger enemies. So this game definitely takes inspiration from the Souls game we know and love. So many familiar styles and mechanics are in the game, but that's not all it has. There are new mechanics, creative approaches and changes that definitely help this game have its own identity. So I'm gonna focus on one of my favorite parts in this type of games, the bosses. So this game has two type of bosses, the main bosses which are called the heresy bosses and the secondary bosses which are called the sinner boss. The main bosses, most of them are good. They provide enough challenge and are fair and memorable. I think that's better than, getting a really hard boss but it's annoying in every way. It's like apart from some bosses like Hussein, the Crow, most of the main bosses are good. I also have to mention the final boss of the game is not at all a boss. If you are expecting a good final boss, it's gonna be a disappointment. If you compare this final boss to Nashandra, the final boss of Dark Souls 2, this makes Nashandra look like an S tier boss. But I can't say the same for the mini bosses. The mini bosses, they're the opposite. Apart from a few, majority of them are ass. They all are designed with the worst features a bosses can have in a Souls-like. We got gang bosses, bosses with tedious gimmicks, bullshit AoE attacks, bosses with minion enemies. This game saw the right bosses or like similar bosses from Dark Souls 2 and took it as ideas for mini bosses. And most of them also had the tedious boss runs. Right now they address it, but when I was playing the game, the elevators were too fast, prevented us from getting out. I couldn't just send it back like we do in all Souls games. It's a minor thing, but it was really annoying for me. Another great change is the Vestige Seeds. Their pricing was too high for it to be viable. If you don't know what they are, they're like temporary bonfires or like temporary resting spots. Most areas in this game have like maximum of 2 permanent resting spots. The rest are just spots where you can plant these temporary ones, which again get reset if new ones are planted. So before they reduced the cost, there was a point in game for me where I ran out of it, and buying it or like buying one was not that helpful. Especially when you die and lose all your souls, you have to grind a lot to have that much amount. But after the patch it has gotten much easier. I was able to buy a few of them together way more easily. Again, even after that, I wish at least every boss had a permanent resting spot. For me, when it comes to bosses, I want to enjoy them without much distraction. When I'm fighting a boss, just let me get back into it fast. Many of the newer Souls games are actually using that. Another minor inconvenience I had was lack of controller remap. Here the jump and action button are the same. In some cases it can even get you killed. Now let's leave all of that and get into the world design and gameplay. The level design is actually really intriguing. I could say it's similar to DS1 level design. Lots of non-obvious shortcuts, interconnected areas, hidden paths. You also have the option to pick which path to explore, which all can lead to different areas, and there could be ladders, locked doors in an area where you may not find how to access it. But way later into the game, in a different area, you end up connecting these two areas through that. And along with this, the dual world mechanic spices it up even further. I gotta say, I was expecting that to be a gimmick, but the dual world mechanic is actually a cool and core part of the game. A really interesting mechanic that helps set this game apart from other Souls games. Peeking into the scary place of Umbral just to see the difference between the two worlds and see the scary sides. And if you peek long enough, these enemies can pull you in. And when you die, you respawn in the Umbral world, but you respawn with half health and the number of enemies is gonna double or triple. There's also a lot of surprise encounters like in all Souls games, but in this game I feel like maybe it was a little bit more than needed. Now the builds, the weapons, I can't say a whole lot. I could one-handed, two-handed, and the dual wield option was also there. Blocking has that health regen mechanic like from Lies of P where you can attack and regain it back. We also have parry, which you can do with weapons and shields. The other thing I like was you can also apply elemental damage on your weapon even if your weapon already has inherent elemental damage. So now let's get into the most mixed part, the enemy density and placements. This game has DS2 like enemy placements. I still remember places like the Iron Keep on how hard it was just to get to the boss. So just like DS2, the boss runs are harder than the bosses. The other games you can be more aggressive, take some risk, once in a while fight a tough enemy. Here every room or section is just packed with enemies. And the most annoying ones are like the ranged enemies, the mini bosses that are turned into normal enemies. I don't know why they did it, but the range attacks, they are broken in this game. The range attacks from these enemies never miss. Their accuracy is too high and they do so much damage. That feels like terrible balance. The AoE and the range attacks are super powerful and has long range. It especially becomes a problem with the higher enemy density and also with the low number of resting spots. And some of these enemies with the range attacks can actually hit from a different zone. Like even if you are in a different plane of existence, their AoEs or like range attacks can reach you. What's best to do is once you get enough vigor like souls to level up, just run past the enemies, find a rest spot if you can, then come back and kill them later. Otherwise, what's mostly gonna happen is you just trying again and again to collect your lost vigor when you die. So if you are one of those who hated the enemy density in DS2, you're definitely gonna hate it here too. I actually enjoyed Dark Souls 2, it's not a perfect game. So what I did was treat each section as a puzzle or like a strategy game. Taking my time, clearing out the archers first, then the annoying ones like the dogs, kite a strong enemy, kill it then proceed. And this game provides the tools for this playstyle. Poison arrows in Dark Souls 2, that's how I clear like annoying boss runs. And in this game, the range weapons are even better. And I actually think this game has the best range weapon system out of all Souls games. I actually want this system in every future Souls game. In this system, you don't need to buy arrows or throwing knives. It works like the mana in all these games. Your ammo will not be completely gone. It actually makes it viable with every build. In a way, I feel like it's a requirement to use this with the given enemy density. So boss turn from situational weapons to like weapons you can use almost anytime, even during boss battle. I also recommend you to use the Umbralam Soulflay. That's such a good way to reduce more than half the health of stronger enemies without them even fighting back. So basically the enemy density can pull people away from this game, which is completely understandable. But I can also say there are tools the game provides, like the arrows, throwing knife, and the lamp, that can be used to deal with. It's just you have to use all of it to have a less annoying time. And sometimes it feels like a requirement. Many of it feels like the mistakes Dark Souls 2 did in terms of its difficulty. If you're okay with it, you will have a better time. Otherwise, it's not for you. The enemy variety also was lacking. It was not a problem at first, but as you progress more and more, you end up seeing a lot of similar enemies from halfway point of the game towards the end game. With all of that, I'm gonna give Lords of the Fallen, the second attempt, a 7 out of 10. I enjoyed it despite the flaws, but for some, these flaws can be fatal. There is interesting ideas and systems that are in the game. The execution could have been done less vague and more smooth. The approach to difficulty was not great. Like, what's a good difficulty seems to miss. But at least the patches seem promising. So my recommendation is, if you are planning to play it, at least wait for a couple of months. That's all from me. If you like this, give a like and subscribe.